It is 2 p.m. here in Eastern Time, so we are going to go ahead and get started. So good morning, afternoon, or evening from wherever you are joining us in the world, and thank you for tuning in. The Mental Health and Developmental Disabilities National Training Center is proud to bring you our third webinar titled Invisible Disabilities, Understanding and Accepting What We Can't See, with featured presenter Russell Lehmann. So before we get into the webinar, I'd like to extend a message to all of you on behalf of the entire MHDD team during this unique and challenging time we're in with the global pandemic. So please know that our team is still working hard to support you and the individuals that you may serve, as this is not only a trying time related to our physical health, but our mental health as well. So we know that stress and anxiety is likely to be elevated during this time. So please continue to visit our social media, where we're posting accessible resources related to mental health, disability, and COVID-19. And furthermore, please let us know if there's anything else that we can do to support you through this process, because we are all in this together. So we are going to jump into the webinar, and before we do, we're going to do a couple of housekeeping items related to technology. So if Russell, you could go to the second slide. Perfect, thank you. So the controls that we're going to be using through Zoom are the chat box and the hand raising feature, both of which are at the bottom of your Zoom window. We will allot time for content related questions at the end of the webinar, but if there is a problem during the presentation, such as a technology issue, feel free to type it into the chat box or the question and answer at the bottom as well, and we'll do our best to address your concern. So this webinar is being captioned live, as you can see in the chat box, and it is being recorded and will be available for view on our YouTube channel and our website, mhddcenter.org. We will send out the link to the recording to all the registered participants once it is available, and we'll also be sending up a follow-up email after the live webinar with a post-evaluation and instructions on what to do if you want to receive continuing education credits. So it is my pleasure to introduce our presenter, Russell Lehmann. Russell is an award-winning and internationally recognized motivational speaker, poet, author, and advocate who happens to have autism. His words have been featured in the USA Today, LA Times, Success Magazine, NPR, Yahoo News, and is also archived in the Library of Congress. A graduate of MIT's Leadership in the Digital Age course, Russell showed signs of autism as a newborn. However, he was not formally diagnosed until the age of 12 after suffering through 5 weeks in a lockdown psychiatric facility. His new book, On the Outside Looking In, recently hit bookstores nationwide. Russell currently travels the world, spreading hope, awareness, and compassion in a raw and dynamic fashion, while also setting his sights on erasing the stigma and stereotypes that come with having a disability. Russell's passion is to be the voice for the unheard, for he knows how difficult and frustrating it is to go unnoticed. Contact Russell or visit his website at www.theautisticpoet.com. And with that, I will turn it over to Russell.
Thank you very much, Danielle. Thank you all for being here today. This is my first webinar, so I hope it goes well. And I hope you are all hanging in there during these unusual times and taking care of yourselves both physically and mentally. Mental health, like Danielle alluded to, is always important, but even more so during these times when we're basically stuck inside. So with that being said, I'd like to welcome you to this webinar. The learning objectives for the next hour will be to broaden your perspective on the human condition, how to better interact, support, and accommodate individuals with invisible disabilities, and also how to initiate dialogue and conversation surrounding emotionally painful and vulnerable topics. Like Danielle said, there will be a Q&A at the end, and so I'll probably leave 10 or 15 minutes for that because I really like the Q&A process, because you guys can just ask me directly, what the kind of information you're looking for, and I can answer it in a much more impactful way. So a little background about me. I only really started public speaking. I only started this journey on public speaking about 3 years ago. And before that, I really had nothing going for me. I was 25. I was living with my parents, really didn't have a job, no contact with the outside world. So in the past 3 years, I've not only learned a lot about how to be part of society, but how to run my own business, how to be independent, how to travel alone, And so it's been a very long, difficult past 3 years, but also very rewarding too. And I always tell kids, life may not get easier, it might actually get harder, but if you believe in yourself, life will get better. And that has certainly been the case with me. So this is me on the left side. You can see me, I'm probably around 8 years old here. I started experiencing signs of autism as a newborn, symptoms increasingly impacting my life until around the age of 7, when they really started to significantly affect me. And so I wasn't diagnosed until I was 12, unfortunately. And when I was 11, before my diagnosis, I actually dropped out of public school, and that was in the 5th grade. And that's when I really lost all contact with the outside world. From the age of around 11 to, like I said, 25, I really basically was a societal recluse. Stayed inside my house all day, just kind of staying near my mom, only person who could bring me comfort. My OCD, depression, anxiety, all my invisible disabilities really I was a slave to them for 14 years of my life. And so I developed tremendously in my professional and personal life. And so if you can just kind of take these two pictures at face value, this is the potential that lies behind each and every one of us, no matter how old we are, who we are, what we've been through, what we're going through. And when I look at these two pictures, I'm reminded of how far I've come. Every day is still a struggle for me, and I'll get into more detail on that later. But just to realize that I really shouldn't be where I am professionally. I never thought I'd have a job. I always thought I'd be living with my parents. So it's just this picture, this slide for me is just always a great reminder of how far I've come, and to practice self-care more, be nicer to myself, because I should be extremely proud of where I am, and I am, but sometimes I lose sight of that. So this is basically, if I could draw you a picture of my brain, this would be it. I have about 7 or 8 invisible diagnoses. Individuals on the spectrum are at about a 70% higher increase of developing mental health diagnoses. So for me, I have autism, I have bipolar type 2, which is more of the depressive bipolar. I have somatic seizures, which are non-epileptic seizures. They usually occur when I'm having a severe panic attack. I have panic disorder, PTSD. I had a battle with anorexia. I have OCD, depression, anxiety. So I have a lot of invisible disabilities. And my mind, with all these disabilities that I have, my mind is very complex. And a lot of the times it feels like a tangled mess of roads, like you see here in this slide. And I apologize if I have to take breaks for drinks. I actually just had surgery a few days ago, and the medicine I'm on is making my mouth dry. So when all my symptoms are increased, I don't know what's going on in my head. I cannot comprehend it. I can't explain it. I just feel this tremendous physical pain literally in my brain, like my brain is on fire. And so when people see me like this, whether I'm traveling in an airport, and all these symptoms coalesce into a meltdown, I've had many meltdowns at airports. And oftentimes passersby will pay me no heed. They'll act like I'm invisible, or they will notice me, but they'll look at me like I'm crazy. And honestly, I don't know which one is worse. I've had multiple disheartening and just discouraging experiences being part of society these past 3 years when I'm having a difficult time. And again, people either pretend like I don't exist because they don't know how to interact with me, or they look at me like I'm a crazy person. And so the goal of this webinar is to give you a little bit of insight into how I feel when I'm struggling, but also for tips and tricks for you guys to not be one of those people who, pretend like I'm invisible or look at me like I'm crazy, but rather have the confidence necessary to go forward and help someone you might not know, just maybe a stranger who's having a difficult time in public, how to better interact with them, kind of the dialogues and the steps you can take to initiate some kind of movement forward in helping them through their struggles. Now, a great example of a stranger helping me during one of my meltdowns in airport was a viral Facebook post of mine from 2 years ago when I really started traveling a lot for the first time. And I'm going to read to you the Facebook post now. This is David. He works for American Airlines. I will never forget this man for as long as I live. After having my flight delayed and missing my connection for the second time in 2 days, I succumbed to the worst meltdown of my life at the Reno Tahoe International Airport. He happened to find me curled up behind a vacant ticket counter. I was crying my eyes out, rocking back and forth as my muscles convulsed at a rapid pace. Sweating profusely, I was hyperventilating while my body shook in terror. David calmly approached me, and with the utmost compassion, he asked me what was wrong. I was barely able to get any words out. I believe I mumbled the words, "I don't know, I can't think, I have autism." He crouched down beside me and let me know that there was still a way I could get to Cincinnati late that night, therefore making it possible for me to give my speech the next day. During a time of indescribable mental torment and anguish, this man showed me compassion. This man showed me that he cared. Hell, he even offered to buy me a slice of pizza for lunch. David offered to reroute my flight, and he gave me some time to think about it, for I told him that I was afraid of exacerbating my symptoms by boarding another flight, that is, a tightly enclosed space filled with vast amounts of stimuli. After about 10 minutes, David approached me again, this time accompanied by the pilot of the plane I had the choice of boarding. David had notified the pilot, along with the entire crew, of my situation, and he took it upon himself to rearrange a whole row of seats, the flight was not full, so that I would be able to have some space to myself during the flight. The pilot was also incredibly kind, reminding me that what I was experiencing only added validity to the message that I spread and to the lives that I touch. I ended up deciding to board the flight. I was the very first to board, and David walked onto the plane with me, introducing me to the flight crew one by one. I was still shaking and crying, but this time I was crying tears of thankfulness. If it hadn't been for David, I would have not gotten on that plane. Now, this post isn't about autism. It's just about doing the right thing, about being a good person, about accepting others and reaching out to your hand to someone in need, even if they are a total stranger. Each and every single one of us is a member of society, and it is our obligation as such a member to support one another, especially during an individual's time of need. Show what you're made of. Give a damn. Stand above all the fighting and arguing. Be brave and open your heart. Fulfill your moral duties as a human being. Be like David. Now that episode of mine, that meltdown in the airport, was very traumatic for me, and it still haunts me to this day. Whenever I enter an airport, it's very difficult for me to enter airports, even though I travel very frequently. And after that episode, during that episode, I wanted to quit everything. I wanted to just go back on disability and move back in with my mom because it's just too much. But then David showed up, and he restored my faith in humanity. I still see David every time I go to my home airport, and we've become pretty good friends. And, he knew nothing about autism. We were interviewed by many sources, many newspapers, media, and, they always asked him, "How did you know what to do?" And he said, I was just doing what I thought was right. I was being a decent person. And so that's the lesson here, is a lot of times we overthink what we need to do. And for me, the simplest acts mean the most. Just, crouching down beside me saying, "Hey, buddy, what's wrong?" Or, "Can I help you with anything?" It doesn't have to be anything extraordinary. It's very simple. It's just connecting with others on a human level, validating that person during their time of need, and accepting them and trying not to change who they are or necessarily even fix the situation right away. Just being there with them, because the worst feeling that anybody can have when they're struggling is that they're alone. And I felt completely alone there, even though I was surrounded by a bunch of people in an airport. So with David just coming over and just being near me, it comforted me, knowing that, there is someone here that cares about me. So great story. It's pinned to the top of my Facebook page, that story, so you can read it after the webinar is over as well. A huge part of interacting with individuals with invisible disabilities, such as autism and mental illness, is compassion. Compassion is a verb. We often forget that. We often forget that we have to practice it each and every day to become better at it. We all want a more compassionate society, right? But the ball is in our court. We have to initiate the change we wish to see in this world. So for me, if I'm asking for compassion from basically everybody I come into contact with, I need to, put the same amount of compassion out there. And I do. But when I'm having bad days, I don't feel like doing it. And I know a lot of us feel that way. We're busy with work, our families, we have too much going on, and we forget that, the basic part of being part of society is, again, that human interaction. So even when I'm having a really bad day, I try to smile to a random person, or just wave to a random person, or just write a little note on a receipt. Little things like that put that motivation out there, because it creates a ripple effect. And if I'm compassionate to somebody and they're having a hard day, they're more likely to be compassionate to somebody else during that day. So that ripple effect can create waves of change if we keep putting that out there. Now, a big part of compassion is being humble. A lot of times when I choose to confide in somebody that I do not know, and that honestly I don't want to confide in, but I have to because they're the only person around, they will say, for instance, I will say, I had a really tough day yesterday. I couldn't get out of bed. I had a lot of intrusive thoughts and suicidal ideations. Some people have said to me, well, that's okay. Everybody has their bad days. Or, oh, I had a bad day too, man. Tell me about it. That doesn't help my situation. I need to be validated. Every day is a struggle for me. And it's nice to know that some people out in the world, even though my struggles are invisible, it's nice to know that some people still know how hard I fight each and every day just to wake up and get out of bed, not to mention all the other stuff I have to do. So when I confide in you, I don't need you to compare your situation with mine. No two people are alike. We can never compare ourselves to anybody else other than who we were in the past. So if I confide in you, you need to validate my struggles. You need to validate everybody's struggles. We need to be validated. It's part of the process of healing. It's part of the healing process, and it helps us process. When we're validated from an outside source, it helps us process what we're going through. And so again, to say that, oh, we all have bad days, or just hang in there, I had a bad day too, that's not what I'm looking for. I want to be validated. I want to be heard. I want to, talk more about my struggles. That's why I confide in you. If I confided in you just to hear that everybody has bad days, well, I already knew that. But firstly, I didn't just have a bad day yesterday. I might have thought about killing myself yesterday. So again, it's about validation. It's about treating people with respect, being humble, not comparing yourself to them when they confide in you, and listening. Listening is huge. Compassionate listening really means just simply listening. A lot of times when people talk to others, when they confide in others, that person, they want to go ahead and try to fix things. Like, okay, how can we make this better for you right now? But that doesn't help either, because you need to process things to be able to move forward. And if somebody is there just to listen, that makes all the difference. I don't want you to fix my problems. I don't want you to, try to make them disappear. I am who I am. I love who I am. And I've made it this far on my own. All I need is some support. I don't need you to take the helm and try to, steer the ship in a direction I might not want it to go. Now, when it comes to humility and compassion, again, I'm very new to society. Like I said, this is only like my third full year being part of society. And so for the previous 14 years, when I was not part of society, I basically observed the outside world. And I still do to this day. And I find a lot of things wrong with society. I'm very philosophical. And I believe what Rousseau wrote many years ago is that, society really shackles and chains us. And in one aspect of that is there are many obligations that we all have when being part of society. But one of the core tenets is to look out for our fellow members of society. And we don't do that anymore. And one of my favorite philosophers is Marcus Aurelius. He was a Roman emperor. And he believed that everybody has a duty in life bigger to themselves, that this life just isn't about us. It's not about just getting what we want and moving ourselves forward, but it's about a communal effort to progress as a people, as a society, encompassing all minorities, people from different backgrounds, to be able to build a diverse set of not only people, but principles and perspectives. Diversity produces perspective. So Marcus Aurelius, he's my role model, because even though he lived 2,000 years ago, he was so humble that whenever he would come home from a war, and he would have the triumphs and the celebration in the downtown streets of the Roman Empire, he would have a man walk behind him and continually whisper in his ear, "Remember, Marcus, you are just a man." Because back then people would say he's a god, and they would really create this superhuman aspect of the Roman emperors when they came back from war, and he didn't want that for himself. He wanted to remain humble. He wanted to look out for his fellow people, because if he thought he was better than anybody else, that made it a bit more difficult for him to relate to others. So compassion is huge. I practice it daily. Again, it doesn't have to be big things, but whatever you're up to, at least once a day, try to do something for somebody else, even if it's like in these days when we don't interact much with people during this isolation period. Maybe it's just leaving a friendly, random message on your friend's Facebook page that you haven't talked to in a while. Just, again, creating that ripple effect that will soon turn into waves of change. So supporting individuals with invisible disabilities. Gauge your body language, right? It's funny to me that we're expected to be able to say, read a room, the saying, hey man, can't you read a room? So people are expected to read a room, but I find that oftentimes people can't read individuals. And I've had a lot of people come up to me, whether I'm at a reception, say, I speak at a lot of conferences, so there are a lot of receptions before the conferences, and usually I don't know anybody there. I'm just there to give a speech the next day, so I'm that quiet guy in the back of the room, with his drink, pretending like I'm busy on my phone, because I don't know how to interact with people through small talk. I can only really interact with people who I don't know through matters of substance. So during these receptions, it's very awkward for me, and my anxiety gets high, and my depression gets high too, because I feel very left out. Even though I don't know how to communicate in small talk with people I don't know, I still very much want to socialize. We're social creatures. Everybody wants to socialize. So it's funny how a lot of people, when I'm in the corner of the room with a drink by myself, pretending to be on my phone, not talking, but just scrolling through my phone, people, again, will act like I'm invisible, or they'll come up to me and just start talking, like really just like talking my ear off. And I don't know, maybe they need to be validated for some reason. But again, gauge my body language. If I'm not smiling, if I'm, looking like I might be cold or apathetic, for me, that usually means that I'm struggling on the inside. When I'm struggling on the inside, my outside features shut down. So I look very standoffish. I look very cold, very mean. So if you see that from somebody you might work with, one of your clients, one of your coworkers, anybody in your life, if somebody looks kind of mean and they're not saying much and they're distancing themselves, it's a very probable sign that they're struggling with something on the inside. Regular check-ins, again, with regards to anybody who's in your life who may be silently struggling. Regular check-ins such as, how are you? Anything you need? Very simple questions, nothing too extravagant. Don't make it too complicated, because when we're struggling on the inside, it's easier to become overwhelmed, and therefore asking a complicated question we might not be able to answer. So whether it's again, a client of yours or a friend, this is a tricky one, because you want to check in with them, but you don't want to check in too much to the point where that individual gets annoyed. I've had people, check in with me too much during the day, and again, I appreciate it. I will always appreciate that. But there is a time where I feel like they're trying to be my babysitter, right? Almost every 5 minutes, they're like, oh, let me help you with that. And then they'll start helping me with things I don't need help with. So again, don't try to fix anything, just simple questions, simple check-ins. The fact that you're asking a question to them means more than what the question encompasses itself. Again, it's the simplest things that make the biggest difference. So if you can ask them even just one question, they're more likely to reach out to you later when they need to themselves. Do not take a behavior at face value. All behaviors are a byproduct of an emotion or a past experience. And a lot of the times, especially in schools, we see kids behaving quote unquote badly and we punish them. We don't look at the impetus and the catalyst behind those behaviors. So again, remember perspective. I'm going to preach a lot about perspective later in this webinar because perspective is huge. What you do not see, I always say, what you do not see is much more important than what you do see, because you don't see me struggling. I was struggling earlier today. I'm still struggling today, right now, but you don't see that. You see, me giving this webinar. So I want to get this, kind of ram this in your heads. What you do not see is much more important than what you do see. So when you see a behavior, ask yourself, what could be behind that? What am I not seeing here? Behavior, no matter how quote unquote bad it is always a byproduct of something in the past or something happening on the inside. So try not to punish right off the bat. Yeah, punishment is appropriate, but we also want to heal people. We want to help them process their actions, their behaviors, so they can become better individuals in the future. We don't want to just punish and say, work here is done. We want to get to the root of it. Take every opportunity to enter the individual's world. For me, it is extremely exhausting having to enter society's world every single day. I don't like this world, honestly. There are very, very few people I relate to. I think very differently. Having multiple diagnoses makes my mind very complex, and therefore my thought processes and the way I think is very different than the average human. So it's hard having to fit into this world every day and having to enter this world every day. So when you can, take the opportunity to enter the person you're helping, to enter their world. I was recently asked after a conference, I think in February in Alaska, one of the teachers asked me, one of my kids, he runs back and forth in the classroom for about an hour before we can start his therapy because he just needs that time to process himself and to get his energy out. But I don't know what to do during that time because he wants to do it by himself. And I told her, well, instead of trying to, maybe shorten that, why don't you just try running with him? You don't have to communicate with him. You can just, mirror what he's doing. And that might make him feel like you're trying to enter his world. Because, even when I try to do things when I'm out in public to soothe myself, I might look kind of weird, whether that's, having a meltdown, I'm rocking back and forth, or things like that. I stand out. So if you guys, or not you guys, but if more people can enter other people's world, we don't get embarrassed as much for being ourselves because there's someone right there with us to go through those actions that otherwise might stand out very much in the grand scheme of things. Lastly, and this one is be kind. Again, emphasize that the simplest actions often mean the most. Kindness, compassion, it's huge. The root of the word passion, it actually comes from the Latin word to suffer, like the passion of the Christ. That means to suffer with Christ. So the root word of compassion means to suffer with. So basically, when you see someone suffering, you go by the root definition of what compassion means, to suffer with. Just be there for that person. If they're sitting down on the floor crying, sit next to them. Offer your shoulder for them to, lean their head on, give them a hug. Just be there with that person. That is the biggest thing you can do. And everything will kind of come naturally after that. So be kind to everybody. You never know what anybody's going through. Again, I encounter a lot of rude, mean people in this world, and that's very detrimental to my well-being, especially on a day I'm struggling. But having my perspective of so many things inside me that people can't see, I generalize that over to give other people that benefit of the doubt. So if people are being mean to me or being rude or somebody cuts me off in traffic, I just got to think, what am I not seeing? Because again, what I'm not seeing is more important than what I am seeing. Initiating vulnerable and sensitive dialogue. A lot of invisible disabilities are, there's a lot of catalysts behind them. And for me, I have PTSD and I've had a lot of traumatic experiences, and they're not very easy to talk about. And a lot of kids, especially, they act out because of traumatic experiences in their past. So to initiate that vulnerable dialogue, that especially if you don't know the person that well, that they're hesitant to trust you, you can start by asking easy yes or no questions. All right. Hey, you look like you're having a rough time. Is that right? And they can just simply say yes or no. Even if you know the answer, like obviously they're having a rough time, you still want to ask, hey, are you having a rough time? Because the answer will be yes. And that's an easy question for them to answer because it's so apparent, right? But again, that builds trust. The more you initiate dialogue, the more trust subconsciously is being built. So ask easy yes or no questions to start. You having a rough day? They answer yes. Then you can say, would you like my help? I'm a good listener, something like that. And they can either say yes or no. And if they say no, you can say, well, I would like to help you. Can I just maybe sit here for a minute and just so I can be here with you? Again, they can answer yes or no. So start off easy yes or no questions. Also, a key component is to share vulnerability of yours to foster an even greater connection and gain further trust. So if I'm seeing a kid struggling and I don't know this kid, maybe I did just some random kid in a school where I'm giving a talk, I can go up to him and say, hey, you look like you're struggling. And again, this is different than comparing when I was talking about earlier, when people compare rather than validate. You want to validate, but then also share your experience. Don't compare, just share your experience. So I can say, hey, you look like you're having a really rough time. That's validating. But then I can say, I know my share of dark times, and I don't know what you're going through right now, but I can tell you that, I feel alone a lot of the times. And again, not comparing, but fostering a bond between struggles. Struggle is the one thing, that we all have in common. It's probably the only thing that humans all around the world have in common, is that we all struggle at times. So if we can create a connection and foster some trust and a bond between that commonality of struggle, that is very important. And when you share vulnerability of yours, like, hey, when I was younger, I was very overweight and I was very self-conscious and I got picked on a lot. That helps them trust you because they're, again, subconsciously, we as humans know when another person is letting their guard down, especially if they're trying to help us. So if you share vulnerability of yours, more likely that in due time, the individual will share theirs with you as well. Again, do not take action, simply listen. Again, philosophy for you all. Zeno of Citium, he was the first Stoic philosopher. And he once said that we have 2 ears and only 1 tongue because God intended us to listen twice as much as we talked. We talk too much. People talk too much. We really do, especially when we're trying to help people. So listening is great. Again, 2 ears, 1 tongue. Remember that. Do not take action right off the bat. Sure, after you're done with the discussion, you can go back to the table, kind of reevaluate how you can progress further. But when it's time to listen, you need to listen. Don't interrupt the person. If they need to vent for an hour straight, let them vent, because that's very cathartic. Getting their emotions out verbally to somebody else is very cathartic for the individual struggling. And then reduction-focused inquiries. Again, balancing this with examples of your own. what I mean by reduction focused is that you want to get to the bottom of something, okay? Now, again, it's going to be up to you guys to decide which of these to implement at the best time. Because yeah, you're going to want to listen at times, but if it's your fifth conversation with this person, you're getting to know them pretty well, then you can ask not only more questions, but more complicated questions too, because they're more comfortable with you. So reduction focused inquiries, when it's right, and a lot of this is going to rely on intuition, right? And insight. Again, you can use that by thinking to yourself, what am I not seeing here? Reduction focused inquiries, basically getting to the bottom of something. So say I'm speaking to somebody and they're really anxious, but we don't know why because they have no obligations today. So what are you anxious about? And they say, I don't know. And you can ask, well, how do you feel aside from anxiousness? And they might say, I'm feeling frustrated. And I say, okay, well, why are you frustrated? Because I'm anxious. And I'll say, okay, you're frustrated that you're anxious. And then I can maybe think, if they're frustrated that they're anxious, this anxiety is probably happening a lot more than it should, and they're getting frustrated at each occurrence now. It's a deduction method. So again, it's hard to give a concrete example without having someone here to show you how to use reduction focused inquiries, but it's basically getting to the bottom of something. Why, without sounding annoying, right? You don't want to say, well, why is that? And they tell you, well, why is that? And they tell you, well, why is that? Right? You basically, you want to keep asking why, but in a different format. Because the more whys you ask, then you'll find out the how and the what. So again, a lot of information to process here, but you'll have this slide, and you can always reach out to me on Instagram and my website if you have any further questions with specific scenarios that I can help more efficiently with. So what do you see? Again, what do people see when they look at me? I've said before, I travel a lot, and every time I get into a new city for a speaking engagement, I usually take an Uber or a Lyft. And it's one of the most awkward times because for me, I'm getting picked up at the airport, and the driver will ask me, are you here on vacation? Are you for work? And I'll say work. And they're like, oh, okay, what do you do? And I'll be like, I'm a public speaker. And of course, they're going to say, oh, what do you speak about? And I'll say, well, I speak about autism and mental health. I actually have autism myself. And 9 times out of 10, they will say, wow, you must be doing really good. I would have never guessed you had autism. And, I give a half smile on the outside, but on the inside, I'm like, I have a lot more work to do to spread awareness. Because firstly, you don't look like you would have autism. Well, you wouldn't say that to somebody who tells you they have diabetes, right? Oh, well, you don't look like you have diabetes. Or someone who tells you they have cancer. I wouldn't say, oh, well, you don't look like you'd have cancer. So I don't even know where that comes from. Oh, you don't, because how would you ever know somebody has autism, right? So that's always an awkward conversation to have because they usually preface it by, you must be doing really well. And honestly, the past 3 years, although they've been very enjoyable professionally and personally, just from the amount I've grown and have accomplished, they've also been the most difficult. It's hard for me to be part of society, and it's hard for me to do everything I do, but I push myself to the limits every day because I'm motivated to spread my message. But it does take a toll on my well-being. And so, when Uber drivers say, oh, you must be doing pretty well, I'll honestly say no. I'm not doing well. I wouldn't wish my mental demons on anybody unless they're prepared to take on a challenge. I want people to know that it's okay to struggle. And again, if I had more time to talk about this, I'd be going on and on. But the point is, what those Uber drivers saw is a man getting into the back of their car who says he's a public speaker, and he speaks somewhat articulately. That's what they see. And so they preface the whole conversation they move forward with on that. And then I have to turn it around 180 because of what they do not see. All right? Because they do not see that an hour before I was picked up by them, I had a panic attack in front of 100 people at baggage claim, and not one person even bothered to ask if I was okay. What they do not see was that last week, I was up all night, crying in bed, having suicidal ideations, and the only thing stopping me from moving forward with that was my message I give to others and the example I want to set for the younger generation out there to push through their struggles and to be open about what they struggle with. They do not see that 3 years ago, I was admitted to a psychiatric ward where I was verbally abused and put down and berated, and I left worse off than when I entered. They don't see my past history. They don't see what I've been through that day. They don't see what I'm feeling on the inside that moment when I'm in their car. So again, what you do not see is much more important than what you do see. We all have to have that perspective. We all have to broaden our perspective. No two people are alike. I will not ever know what anybody goes through aside from myself. So even if it's somebody who has the same exact diagnosis as me and is the same 29-year-old male, I still can't compare myself because I will never know, and we will all never know what anybody else goes through aside from ourselves. So this is kind of a little experiment for you guys. So there's a horse is tied to a 2-foot rope, and there is a bale of hay 15 feet away from the horse. Yet the horse is able to eat from that bale of hay. Now, this is my first webinar, so I don't know how to take questions here, but we don't need questions because, so Danielle, don't worry about it, because I'm just going to show you. I just want you to think about it for a minute, give you like 10 seconds to think about it. So how is this horse, when he's tied to a 2-foot rope, able to eat a bale of hay that's 15 feet away from him? Well, the answer is the horse might be tied to a rope, but the rope isn't tied to anything. It's just looped around this thing, this bar, and the horse can easily walk away from it. Therefore, he's dragging the rope behind him in the dirt, and he can go over 15 feet to eat the hay. So again, it's what you do not see. What do you not see here? You did not see that this rope is really not tied to the pole. And that's the most important part of this whole thing. So again, always ask yourself, what am I not seeing? What might be going on here that I'm missing? And again, a lot of the times you will not know what you do not know. But just knowing that is called metacognition when you actually think about what you're thinking about, knowing that what you know, let me rephrase this, having the awareness that you do not know what you do not know is huge, because that instantly broadens your consciousness level, it instantly broadens your awareness and perspective. So you don't have to know what you don't know, or you don't have to know what you don't see. All you have to know is that be aware of your ignorance. We're all ignorant. Nobody knows everything. When we're ignorant of our ignorance, that leads to arrogance. But when we are aware of our ignorance, that leads to compassion, understanding, new ideas, and perspective. So I came up with this quote about a year ago. Autism is an invisible disability, which is perhaps the most difficult aspect when it comes to being a member of society. Be a little kinder, love a little deeper, and never forget that perspective is everything. You never know what another person is going through. I recently took a class at MIT last year in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And one of the guest speakers was a Supreme Court judge from a district in Michigan. And he was blind. And funny thing, when he was running for his Supreme Court seat, his campaign slogan was "Blind Justice," which I thought was pretty funny. But he was blind, and you could tell he was blind. He had his walking stick, he wore dark glasses, right? And he was standing in front of our class talking about when he travels, people are very nice to him. They open doors for him. They ask if they can, carry things for him. They're very nice. And he was going on and on about that. And I'm sitting in the class and I'm feeling discouraged because that never happens with me, because mine are invisible. And so I asked him, how can I get what you receive? How can, I want people to help me, strangers to help me like they help you. But the fact that they don't know I need help, They don't. And he honestly said he wished he could answer that, but he just can't. And his answer was probably very sobering, because I realized that we will never achieve full awareness and thus acceptance. But as long as we keep talking about sensitive topics, such as mental health, such as autism, that are invisible, the level of consciousness throughout society will rise. The level of awareness will rise. And, if that just means, one person every year coming to my aid, as opposed to none in the past, that makes a huge difference in and of itself. So again, I will never, nobody will ever know what's going on inside me. A lot of people, unless they know me really well, won't know I need help like they would know that the blind judge needed help. But that's okay. That's, again, a huge reason to talk about things that we don't talk about, is just initiate that dialogue about intimate subjects and vulnerability to increase national and international conversation on the human experience, right? It doesn't have anything to do with disabilities. This is just about being human. What does the human condition consist of? What does the human experience consist of? And how can we come together through those experiences, some shared, some not shared, to create a better world for us all through societal equity, achievable standards, emotional clarity, and just all around compassion for our fellow citizens. I'm going to throw some more philosophy at you quickly, and then I think we should have, we'll be wrapping it up. Daniel will speak, and then we can do some questions. A philosophical term is qualia, which is the internal and subjective component of sense perceptions arising from stimulation of the senses by phenomena. Okay, so basically what this is about is perception. And for me, I'm focusing on visual perception right now because we're talking about invisible disabilities. Earlier, we talked about perspective, which is how you look at things. Qualia is about perception, which is how you see things. So ultimately, the perception of your perspective is instrumental. How you see, what you look at is huge. So qualia, if I were to put forth a philosophical thought experiment, I could say that I do not know what anything in this world truly looks like, because for somebody else, when they look at me, they might see a talking flower. Because again, how would I ever know what they're perceiving? I only know what I'm perceiving, but how would I know that to be the truth if I can't compare it to other people's perceptions? And we cannot compare our perceptions, it's impossible. So that's what qualia is. And again, it goes hand in hand with having that open-mindedness and awareness about invisible disabilities. What am I not seeing? What will I never be able to see? But how can I still have the cognizance and wherewithal to help this individual, even though I'm ignorant? Because I'm aware that I'm ignorant, I can still help them. But firstly, I have to be aware of my ignorance. And that's what qualia is about. We will never know, aside from ourselves, anything of truth that we perceive through our eyes. There are two, if you want to read more about this, if you guys want to write it down, there's two papers on this. There's a paper by the philosopher Thomas Nagel, and it's called "What Is It Like to Be a Bat?" So you can look that up afterward. It gives you some context into what I'm talking about. Again, it's "What Is It Like to Be a Bat?" And another one is by the scientist George Stratton. He used inverted eyeglasses. Did an experiment with inverted eyeglasses where he put eyeglasses on for about a month and they flipped his image upside down. And after about 2 days, he adapted to the upside down images where he was able to walk around, view this new perspective perfectly fine. The first 2 days he was bumping into things, but humans are an incredibly adaptable species. Perseverance is the most underrated of human skills. So always believe in yourself, whether that be in helping people or moving through your own struggles. Always believe in yourself, because there's a lot inside of us that is so powerful. And I never want any of you or anyone you care about to doubt the power of the human spirit. It's one of the most powerful forces on this planet. So when you believe in yourself, when you believe in others, anything is possible. And take it from me, someone who really, just has come such a long way in life. Anything truly is possible if you put your heart, your soul into it, and be kind and compassionate to others in order to achieve a better world for us all. This is a book. My second book recently came out last year. You can find it on Amazon, or you can, invite me to speak. I hold book signings. Got to get that plug in there. But this book, it's very transparent. A lot of poems about mental health and lessons learned, insights gained. It was actually kind of embarrassing for me to publish it, but I did so because I want to be the open book. I want to bare my soul, because if I bare my soul, that spreads awareness, and it helps other people talk about things that are difficult to talk about. So that wraps up this webinar. We do have a few minutes for questions, and I wish we had longer because I could go on and on, but this was my first webinar, so I appreciate you guys bearing with me as I try to figure this whole technology thing out. And if you guys have any questions, my website is here. Contact me through there, or I'm not very active on Twitter, but Instagram, Facebook page, where you can read that BeLikeDavid post as well. Feel free to contact me with your personal questions. I can help as much as possible. I have a lot of insight to give, and I just want to make this world a better place. So thank you for attending this session, and I think I will hand it over to Danielle, who will then open it up for questions.
Thank you so much, Russell. I think we can all agree that was incredibly insightful. We really appreciate your courage in sharing your personal experiences and the growth that you've had. So before we open it up for questions, if you could just go to the next slide real quick for me. Perfect. We just wanted to let you know about our next webinar, which coincides with May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So for our webinar topic in May, it's going to be focused on mental health self-care and practical ways that all individuals, regardless of ability or disability, can improve their mental health and their mental well-being. So that will be coming out in the follow-up email that we send with the recording of this webinar, as well as the post-webinar evaluation. So thank you all so much, and we will open it up for questions. And there's actually a really thoughtful question in the Q&A box. So we ask if you could use the Q&A feature at the bottom, that would be best, as the chat box has the captions in it, so we don't want your question to get lost. So Russell, the first question that comes in is, how do you get others to understand we have autism? How do we end up to arriving at an inaccurate picture of autism? We think of the nonverbal ASD, but the nonverbal population makes up a small number of people with autism. Many times my providers think I am neurotypical. I'm a scientist, but people don't think I have autism. It's really hard for me because there are times I want the help, but no one wants to help me.
That is a great question. And autism is very complicated because of the complexity of the spectrum. It is extremely wide, and the mystery behind what causes autism. Autism is a disability unlike any other. It's a whole different animal. So yeah, you're right. There's a lot of people who think of autism and they go into that stereotypical Rain Man picture of, someone pretty much nonverbal. But then there's someone like the good doctor who they see on TV who, can, do all these surgeries and stuff. That's why I am very hesitant to really paint a solid picture of autism, because there isn't one. When I speak, I can only speak for myself. I can't speak for anybody else on the spectrum. I can speak about the commonalities such as mental health, OCD, rituals, routine, the need for schedule, and the need for multiple aspects that are pretty common among the autism population. But the autism community is really, from my perspective, boxing ourselves in a corner, because we're very fractured. There's the nonverbal versus the quote unquote high functioning, which I don't know what high functioning is, because I can be low functioning one day and then high functioning the next. But we're very fragmented. And again, it's not about comparing. It's not about, some adults with autism who are activists. They say, don't try to cure us. Don't try to cure autism. Leave us alone. Don't try to do, ABA therapy because you're trying to make us quote unquote normal. But, there are appropriate cases where ABA therapy is needed. there might be some families who have a very severe case of autism in their family who might want to cure. That's not for me to speak up about, and that shouldn't be for anybody else to speak up about aside from that individual. So again, very complicated answer and question, but I appreciate it. But I get it. You know, many people think I don't have autism, and even when I tell them, it doesn't click because, again, they focus too much on what they see. So, you know, that's my mission, is to try to get where your question is coming from, is to better understand that we have autism, because I still have some colleagues that, you know I struggle with everything I struggle with, but then they think I'm lazy when I can't make it to a meeting, when I'm actually having a meltdown. So I would say to you, easiest thing is to be absolutely honest in how you're feeling. If you're having a meltdown, tell them you're having a meltdown. If you're, you know, if your OCD is going through the roof, tell them you can't leave your house because your OCD is just kicking your ass right now. Apologies for the language, but we have to be as clear as we can, as just open as we can, because that will increase awareness. And the more we do that, the more we'll click with people that, yes, even though that person doesn't look like they have autism, they do, because they told me many times what they go through on a daily basis.
Thank you. So our next question asks, how can we stop the medical community to stop prescribing medications to individuals between 6 and 18? It saddens me that we turn to strong psychotic medications. These antipsychotics are making individuals age 0 to 18 become very overweight or obese.
Again, difficult, you know, it's not black and white. When you phrase it in the question such as, how can we stop the medical community to stop prescribing medications to individuals, you know, I can tell you that I'm not one of those individuals who would benefit from that. I needed medication between age 6 and 18. I needed it, and it's not, you know, we can't make judgments, and we can't answer certain questions for others if we don't know what they're going through. So yeah, I would definitely agree. There's a huge overuse of psychotic medications, especially sedatives, where it makes these kids sleep 18 hours a day and gain a lot of weight. At the same time, there are many times where it's necessary. So this is, again, a very complicated issue, which really starts in the medical community, right? It starts in medical school. We need to really emphasize pharmacology in the study of medical school. Whenever somebody enters medical school, they need to study the effects that pharmaceuticals have and the interactions they have. I don't know. I know that I take medicine to this day, and it's not like I like being on medicine, but the fact is I have a chemical imbalance in my brain. And again, if I had diabetes, I'd be taking my insulin. So I have a chemical imbalance in my brain, so I need to take my medicine, just like someone with cancer would take chemo and someone with diabetes would take their insulin. I very much agree, like I said, that it's being overused and improper times, and I've had that interaction with psychiatrists. Best thing you can do is focus on your circle, your circle, and educate yourself through verifiable scientific sources, not Facebook groups or anything like that, but to speak up for what you think is right for your circle. We can't speak up for people we don't know, because again, they might need it, and it's all about what we do not see. And if we don't see that they need it, that does not mean that they don't need it. All right. Sorry for being a little, there was a double entendre there, but I hope you get the gist of what I'm saying.
Thank you. So we have an individual that asks, how important is it to tell students that I work with that they're on the spectrum? They know they're different, but in a place where autism is with incredible stigma and no service, will it help?
So great question. I would tell them it depends on their state of well-being, but if they're doing pretty well, if they're pretty, stable in their moods right now, earlier you can tell somebody that they're different, whether it be autism or something else, the better, because the earlier they are able to identify with that and know who they are, the more self-confidence they'll accrue, because they'll have more years to process it, and then they can go into society and sometimes be as confident as to really not be affected by the stigma. For me, I'm not affected by the stigma. I love obliterating stigma. I love shattering stereotypes. So I purposely go against the grain in multiple areas where I do not naturally. I just do so to create change in this world because we're too stuck in our ways as a world. So the earlier you can tell a student or your child that they're different, they're on the spectrum, the more you can talk about it. And because if you tell them when they're 12, 14, 18, it's very hard to process that. So again, you want to slowly introduce autism to them and let them know that, it's perfectly fine. It's going to be a difficult road, but I'm going to be here with you to walk that road, and together we will overcome this and make it a better world for us all in the end.
Thank you. And I think I know it's 3 o'clock, but we have one more question that asks, do you have any recommendations for college students with autism? For instance, what types of supports might be helpful for them to get through college?
Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of, I had to drop out of, like I said, I dropped out of public school in the 5th grade, and then I had to drop out of college too. I just say I'm on a long-term hiatus now because I would love to go back. But recommendations for college students, aside from the resources given from the school, which can range from drastically horrible to amazingly impressive, what types of supports might be helpful? Definitely letting your teachers and staff know from day one, even before day one, before your courses start, that you need accommodations. Some of these accommodations might seem like I'm being lazy or that I want to quote unquote cheat or take the easy way out through testing or whatever it may be, but this is actually the accommodations I need to be successful. Lay it all out there, be completely transparent, get a doctor's note if you can, saying, hey, I'm going to bring my A game. I'm in college because I want to be, no one's forcing me to come here, and I want to be here, but I also know it's going to be a big struggle for me. And I need you to help me. I need you to be in this with me. It's a two-way street. I'm going to communicate to you when I might need to step out of the classroom. That doesn't mean going to take a phone call. It just means I need to do some deep breathing because I'm getting anxious. So whether it's writing a letter, talking in person to your teachers, faculty, really be transparent. Don't be ashamed about saying anything, because let me tell you, when you are completely transparent, even though it's very, anxiety provoking at the beginning, once you do tell somebody everything and bare your soul to them, is a huge weight off your shoulders, just to be able to be yourself without any fear of repercussions. And then if you do get repercussions, you have, you have evidence to either get a new teacher or, many alternative options after that. But I would just, number one thing is, aside from what the school offers, be totally transparent. Don't try to be a tough person and push your way through. We all need support, whether we have a disability or not. So don't be ashamed of that.
So we do have a couple more questions. So Russell, if that's okay with you, we can keep going. If anybody needs to hop off, feel free. This will be recorded, like I said, and we will send it out to you all in a follow-up email and on our website. But we can keep going with questions if that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. So the next person asks, can you describe your parents' parenting style? I find that not all individuals are aggressive. Sometimes it's the caregivers who react. Some studies state that caregivers are more likely to attend to a child's medical problems than behavioral problems.
Yes, great question. My mother is my hero, my role model, my idol, my mentor. If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be who I am. I wouldn't be where I am today. Her parenting style, she was very adaptable to whatever I needed. She stopped at everything if I was struggling. She went out of her way to support me in ways she knew that would be beneficial for me, whether that be playing a favorite game of mine or just sitting there or giving me a hug. She was always adapting her way of life to support me. And that's basically her parenting style. She's very laid back. She loves to listen. And again, she just supported me. She believed in me when no one else did. She fought for me when I was too weak to fight for myself. And through just listening to me, she helped me find my voice. So that was her parenting style. And I know very familiar with when you say caregivers can sometimes react in negative ways. And whether it's a caregiver or a parent, it's tough. All parents have their different parenting styles, and I'm not going to put one parenting style on all different parents because, again, it's all about perspective and perception. But if your question is basically what was my mother's parenting style, that was it. Now she's the best mom in the world that I could ask for, but I don't say she's the best mom in the world, period, because for somebody else, she might be the worst mom in the world, right? But I think as a general rule of thumb, if we can adapt ourselves and adapt our lifestyles to supporting someone that we love, that's the main thing, you know, that's the main thing is just to be open-minded and not bump heads with somebody because you're stuck in your ways and you don't want to adapt, but come together like yin and yang and have that smooth connection where you can, you know, start to talk about things and create a bond between you two and start to talk about things that are more difficult to talk about, especially as the child gets older and grows into an adult.
Awesome. And then our last question says, I have 2 autistic adult friends, and when I think the ways I have considered them and dealt with them, I will now be much more aware due to your clear instruction. How can I get more information to both understand and help them?
Well, thank you. That makes me very happy. I'm glad I could shed a little insight and give you some tips moving forward. How can you get more information? That is also a tough one on the spectrum because with people on the spectrum, because you know, there are some people who like to research autism if they know somebody with autism, but again, what you're researching about, or if you're reading a blog by someone with autism is so broad and varies so much that what you're reading about might not have anything to do with the person you know. So I would go directly to the source. You know, if you're 2 friends, if they're comfortable talking about what they struggle with, you can bring this webinar up and say, hey, some things just kind of clicked for me the other day from this webinar, and if you're, you know, if you would like to talk about, you know, how I can help you when you need help, let me know. Or if, you know, you want to tell me some things you've never told before that you would afraid I'd judge you on, I'm not going to judge. You can let it out. So again, it's about communicating. Communication is huge, whether that be through physical communication, such as sitting next to somebody, verbal communication, having a conversation, or just emotional communication, just relating on that, you know, level of human struggle and what encompasses the human condition. The more you ask somebody, the more you will learn about them, right? So if they're your friends, I would just say ask away. If they're uncomfortable speaking to you about it, maybe ask them if you can have a phone call. If that's uncomfortable, maybe texting. If that's uncomfortable, you can write them an email, write them some questions through snail mail, because snail mail, email, those are much more detached ways of communicating during these days. And it's a lot easier for people to be vulnerable the more they are detached from the means of communication. So phone call would be really hard, right? If you write a letter in the mail and it's going to take 4 days to get there, the person is much more likely to be vulnerable because they're that much more detached from the methods of communication.
Wonderful. This question asks, I work with a student on the spectrum. He is 18 and is increasingly having paranoid thoughts about his safety, planes crashing, and just random unrelated questions, but there is no psychiatric help. I'm wondering how, this sounds like from a teacher or a supervisor's perspective, how to just be there for him, as you said. How can I validate him and be helpful?
Great question. Yeah, when I was younger, when I was 8, 9, 10, I really started struggling with my OCD. My OCD would give me a lot of intrusive thoughts, and there would be a lot of paranoid thoughts. And back then, I did not know what an irrational thought was. So for example, my OCD when I was like 9, I would wash my hands 300 times a day until they crack open and start bleeding because my OCD would tell me, Russell, if you don't wash your hands, you are going to catch cancer. Now, I knew you can't catch cancer back then, but I didn't know what an irrational thought was. So that repercussion of me not washing my hands, that punishment was so scary that I indeed washed my hands 300 times a day. You know, there are times when if I didn't check, you know, some of these intrusive thoughts would be really graphic. And here I am, a 9-year-old, feeling really guilty for having these thoughts that I don't want in my head. If I don't check to see if the front door is locked 500 times a day, someone's going to come in and murder my mom in front of me. I mean, these are the kinds of thoughts that I would get, which made me a slave to my OCD rituals. So I can definitely understand safety, planes crashing. I used to get all those intrusive thoughts, and I really didn't have any psychiatric help either. But again, the biggest thing I did, even when I was a teenager, I really wouldn't tell anybody about the specificities, the specific thoughts that would go through my head. I was too ashamed and too embarrassed because they're weird, to be honest, right? I think that, why are these thoughts in my head when I don't want them in my head? So again, how best to be there for him. Again, everything I said before, right? The simple things. But I would also say that preface it maybe by saying, if you ever need to talk, say your student's name is James. Hey, James, if you ever need to talk, you can literally tell me anything, no matter how embarrassing, no matter how guilty you may feel about what you're thinking, you can tell me and I will not judge you one bit, right? Maybe preface it much more bluntly than you have. Again, what I spoke to previously about the method of communication, maybe if you can text with him or get his address or email and say, "Dear James, feel free to use this email if you ever need to reach out to me. If you have some thoughts, paranoid thoughts that you want to vent about, get out, speak about, and you don't feel comfortable speaking in person, you can send them to this email and we can take it from there." Again, think about different methods of communication that might be more beneficial. If your student likes to do a certain activity, maybe doing that activity with him will open him up to feel more comfortable speaking during that activity. For me, basketball was that when I was a kid, so I'd be more able to talk about my struggles playing basketball because I was somewhat distracted. So there are different things. And again, if you want to contact me with the specifics behind this circumstance, I can try to gain some more context and implement some more insight to help you with your student. But I can definitely identify with them and just hopefully let them know, if you can, just this too shall pass. Everything passes, and that the present moment does not dictate his future.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Russell. Again, we really appreciate your contributions and your courage and your experience. We will share all of your contact information in the follow-up email, but if you want to say it again now, just so people know where to find you.
Yeah. So let's see. Yeah, you can contact, my website is theautisticpoet.com. My website is also russelllehmann.com, but it's hard to spell my name. So easiest place to contact me is theautisticpoet.com. And then you can find me on Facebook, Russell Lehmann, speaker, author, advocate, and on Instagram, autism_advocate_.
Wonderful. All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining. Be on the lookout for an email for us, and be sure to stay safe and wash your hands during this time. Thanks, everybody.
For having me, everybody. Appreciate it.